Hello?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Ah, now I hear you. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry, I had my guitar running through the computer before, so I had some different settings and had to change it around.
Okay. Yeah. That's sometimes when you have different stuff open, it switches to headphones and stuff, and then you don't hear it, and then you have to go into the audio settings and switch it back. I have this problem too. Usually my Mac does it, but sometimes it doesn't do it. So
Yeah,
oh, good now.
all
But
good.
you're not Australian. You're American, right?
No, I'm from Brisbane, Australia.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys came down a few years ago, and I was really devastated because I missed the show. But how did that show go for you anyway?
Yeah. I mean, hopefully we're gonna come back with this new album. It's there's highly chances now that we finally gonna make it again. We're already talking to some promoters, and it looks good that we're gonna make it back to Australia and on the term of this tour, like beginning of next year, end of this year, hopefully, something like that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And I'm just listening now to your new album called Under Attack, and it's really ferocious stuff. Like you've still got it. It's as good as the stuff you're doing in the '80s. As good as your last album too. What's keeping the flame burning?
I think you know we're a thrash band. If we cannot sound old, it's very important that we sound fresh
Mm,
and energetic. And even if we're in the business for 33 years, I know a lot of bands slow down when they grow older.
mm,
I think for Destruction, we have a legacy, and it's very important that we have the certain kind of important trademarks like aggressivity and speed are a big part of our mix. And I think it was important that this album has all the trademarks that are important for Destruction: the speed, the aggressivity, the grooves, also some of the catchy hook lines. And I think it's this new album is a good mix of what Destruction is all about. And I'm glad we took a little bit more time to do the songwriting and the recording process this time to make a strong record, because now in the end, after so many records, we're not in a rush anymore. There's nobody pushing us to do an album every 1 or 2 years. So we said, let's make a good one, and I think it turned out great.
yeah. For me, the album that got me into Destruction was actually Thrash Albums, which came out in 2007, which is sort of like a re-recorded greatest hits album. I didn't even know
Yeah.
it at the time. I just heard the album. I didn't know any of your older stuff. I thought it was all new. Then I found out it was re-recorded. And I know some fans weren't happy with it, but I think it sounds great and it sounds better quality than the original recordings. Were you worried about releasing that album at the time?
No, not really. You have to do what you have to do. It's in the end, it's my band, and it's not the people that will decide what's going to happen to my band.
Mm,
So of course we knew there would be a certain kind of you know people that don't like this kind of re-recordings.
yeah,
But it's the headwind. I understand somehow because of the classic material. On the other side, as you said, the younger generation wanted to have this classics with a better sound, and that's what we did. I think it's it was important thing in our career to do a better.
yeah, for sure.
It was
Uh,
important to give them a new kick in the ass. As we all became better players and stuff. It's You can hear this on the albums. There's more details and there's more finesse in the details of the and on the thrash anthems. Of course, I understand some of the old guys that say, "Oh no, you can't do this," but then just listen to the old albums. No problem. You don't have to buy this one. That's how I see it.
yeah. Now, you're you're considered, one of the bands of the German Big Four, along with Sodom Creator and Tankard. And everyone knows the history of the American Bay Area Big Four, Anthrax, Slayer, Megadeth, but we really don't know a lot about the history here in Australia of the German thrash scene. I'm just wondering what was it like back then, and how influenced was it by the American scene, or was it just more, coming from the European bands like Venom and Iron Maiden and those kind of bands?
Yeah, of course, our influences were, of course, not the American bands. Our influence were the new wave of British heavy metal,
Mhm.
and of course the English punk rock also exploited GBH, that stuff.
Yeah.
Of course, when back in the day it was different. We had to write letters and stuff, and there was no metal magazines. When we started, there was only Kerrang magazine from the UK.
Yeah.
It was the only, like, let's say, rock and metal magazine we had at that time. So it was very difficult to connect, but the German scene kind of connected pretty quick. So we kind of, when we started, we knew who was out there. There was a lot of fanzines at the time, little old school magazines that the fans made, and this way you could connect. But we looked up to the American bands because they were the first ones who released albums, basically, and we were impressed, of course, by the skills already. The American bands, if you look at the age of the bands, European thrash bands are a little younger. We like all the American bands, Metallica, Slayer. They're all like a little bit older than we are. Even if you started almost at the same time, the American bands were like one year, 2 years ahead.
Mm.
So we were impressed when the stuff came out, but we were very close friends at that time in Germany already. We were kind of played shows together because the underground was small at the time and there was not so many opportunities. And so we played all the shows in the beginning of the career, where of course was Sodom and Creator and Tankard and Iron Angel and all those German old school stars. And then our first really big tour was Together with Slayer Hell Awaits tour.
Yeah. Do you think the German metal scene's as strong as it was back then? I know there's still a lot of bands coming out. I probably can't name as many, but I know a lot of the older bands like Accept and Scorpions and Rammstein, but I haven't heard too many new bands come out lately from Germany.
I think Germany has a very strong metal scene. If I, but it's also not happening in the mainstream media. It's not on TV, and it's not really happening in the discos or in the normal party events. It's metal is something that it's big here, but it still stands out of the society. We have the biggest festivals in the world here in Europe and also in Germany. Germany, like a lot of bigger cities here, have like metal festivals. So if I would have to count all the German festivals we have, from the big one like Wacken to like smaller ones that have just like some thousand, it must be, I don't know, it must be 40, 50 festivals we have here in Germany. It's crazy. So the scene is definitely strong. And if I look at the record sales also worldwide, Germany is still, together with America and Japan, top 3, I think, on the sales scale. So I think Germany is definitely a strong part of the metal movement nowadays, and it's good to see, because it's still not really accepted, by the mainstream. It's even like a lot of metal bands here are in the Billboard top 100 charts nowadays.
Yeah, it's awesome to see, and I wish Australia would follow suit. Get a metal
The Australian scene is it's a little smaller, right? But it's very dedicated. So I always see it that way. What would happen if metal becomes too big? Like if every idiot would go to a metal show, I think metal is the elite of rock and roll. We want to be different. We don't want to be mainstream, and I think for me it's good this way. I don't want to. There was times in the end of 80s, beginning of 90s when metal was getting huge here in Europe, with all the MTV and stuff, and I didn't really like that part. Actually, it was drawing a lot of weird people into the metal scene, and they come and go, and metal was big for a while here in Europe, really big at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, and then the techno scene and then the grunge scene came up. And like some years later, the metal scene was gone. Like most of those people were just like flipping in, jumping out, just taking the next big trend. And I think heavy metal is not a trend. That's very important.
Yeah, I remember Celtic Frost. They did the album Cold Lake, and they really tried to target the mainstream sort of metal market, and it kind of backfired on them. And a few other bands did pretty well. Metallica did the Black Album, Anthrax did that kind of rap rock thing, Megadeth went a bit more mainstream. Did you ever consider trying to simplify your sound a bit to get a wider audience when that metal boom sort of happened in the late 80s?
No, because I think, the sellout is the beginning of the end, For me, I'm very happy. We have a worldwide following with Destruction, and if you would go more commercial, you would sell our fucking souls, It's it's not many bands did it in a way that is acceptable, and even Metallica kind of overdid it in the end. If you look at them now, they, of course, their more commercial album, especially the Black one, was a big seller, and of course it's a good album in the end, but of course it changed the direction of the band, and it changed the whole band basically. So I don't think money is everything in life, and in music business money can definitely break your back. I always say, name me one rock and roll band that is like multiply selling, that made the greater album after the big success. There's none, because all the great rock and roll records are done before the band had the big breakthrough. I think after the big breakthrough, you're poisoned by money and fame, and then it's much more difficult to write a great rock and roll record.
Yeah, I mean, almost every great band out there has at least one album in their discography that's not so good. When you look back on your discography, is there any albums that you're not as happy with compared to others?
That's we always look very critical back at the releases, and I try to also learn from the mistakes we did. Like sometimes there's stuff that you could do better, and that's always something we do.
Yeah.
We look back and see what can we change. If I look back, I don't know. I think every album has its highlights and its low parts, and if you look back at an album, there will not be every song that you like. So I think there's no such thing as the weakest Destruction album to me. Of course, there's some albums that were more successful than others, and I think in production-wise, I think Metal Discharge, the sound of the album is something I would do better nowadays. But also this album has some good songs, I think. So I definitely think that in between the times when we made the thrash anthems, there was the more difficult time for Destruction to also create new songs. It's maybe where also our weaker albums are, in between Metal Discharge and Devolution. And I think in the last years, since we have a new drummer, it was much easier to write songs again and be creative. And I think it's normal that you have some periods where you are stronger, and then for a while it's more difficult to write great material. And then if you refocus and if you put effort, then hopefully you can come back to strength.
Yeah, for sure.
In the end, we're all humans. We always try to do the best, but of course, especially in the creative job, it's not always possible to make the greatest album. It's you try, but what you achieved is a long process, is a long way, and at the end, you'll find out if you have achieved what you wanted. And especially in the music business, what makes an album a classic is that you look back in some years and say, this one was very special or very good in the end. So I'm glad we still make albums that have, even since the reunion, a good impact on the young bands also.
Yeah, for sure. You're also credited as being, they call it proto black metal, or you're like an influence on black metal. I'm just wondering, do you ever consider yourself black metal? I don't really hear it, and I'm wondering what you thought of the Norway scene that definitely has some inspiration from Destruction and sort of Venom sort of bands.
Of course, it was quite interesting to see that a lot of the black metal bands have us as influences, and of course, I met a lot of those bands also on the festivals and stuff. And my girlfriend, she's from Norway, so I'm going to Norway often, and of course, I see how big black metal is there. It's a part of the culture almost. Yeah. So it's quite interesting. I wouldn't call myself a black metal expert. I toured with some of those bands, and some of those bands are my friends. But I'm not a black metal lover or a big expert. I like some bands, but I'm more into the basics of rock and roll. So black metal is sometimes for me too serious. About themselves also. I like stuff that has a certain irony sometimes also about themselves. Sometimes black metal is missing this. It's a bit too serious for me. I even though I'm I share certain philosophies, I'm sure, but Also the way we play music, thrash metal has a whole different way of playing chords and playing, the picking on the guitar. So there's similarities, but I wouldn't call it like totally influenced. I think what's very important for this black metal bands was, of course, at the beginning, the evilness and the lyrics of Destruction's first music and the aggressivity that we had. And I think that was definitely an influence on a lot of black metal bands.
Yeah, just one last question. Just been listening to so much Motorhead lately, and it was just such a shame that Lemmy died. Just such a
Oh
legend.
yeah,
It doesn't like there's a lot of great bands coming out, but just part of me feels there'll never be another band that can carry on the torch like Lemmy or Ronnie James Dio or any of those gods. I'm just wondering, what do you think? Do you think the bands that are coming up now have that sort of potential to be the next Lemmy Kilmeisters or the next, Ozzy
yeah. It's actually a very good question. I got many people are asking me this lately. Who's going to be the future stars of heavy metal, rock and roll? Are we going to have icons again, like Lemmy and Ozzy and Dio? It's difficult to say at this certain moment because now what we're having now is something that my generation, has for the first time ever, is that the idols are dying. That before we never thought about this, and I think we need another 10, 20 years to really find a solution for this question. This because basically Lemmy and this whole generation of musicians is like 20, something like 20 years older than me. So they're 20 years ahead, and of course some of the bands that are my age will overtake and become future headliners at festivals. I remember times when Motorhead were playing small venues in Europe. There was the beginning of the 90s where Motorhead weren't doing very good. Came back to strength at the end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s. So all the musicians and all the music goes through difficult periods back and forth. So I'm not worried about the future of rock and roll and heavy metal. I think there will be new people coming, and Lemmy, of course, he's the super icon. He was already an icon in the 80s, so he was the role model of a rock and roller. Somebody like him you don't find very often, of course, But I'm not worried about the scene. I see a lot of young bands rising, a lot of people loving heavy metal, and there's already some bands, young bands on the rise now that are playing big venues. So I think I'm not worried about that there's no more heavy metal stars in the future.
Yeah, for sure, man. I agree 100%. And thanks for doing the interview because you got some really interesting subjects, and we're putting it up on the website soon, so I can send it through on Facebook if you want to have a read or anything like that.
Yeah, it'd be great if you put it on our Facebook site so we can maybe share it on the Facebook. When the album comes out, it's always good to share articles and interviews and then album reviews with the fans.
Yeah, I'll definitely be doing all I can to promote the album for you.
Thank you.
All right, man. It's been a pleasure talking
to
you. You're one of the legends of heavy metal, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Levi, and hopefully see you soon down under. We're planning to come back to Australia, and hopefully it's going to happen more sooner than later.
Okay, man. Well, I'll be up the front row.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.